Welcome back to another episode of the Data Set Piece podcast. We've already completed 10 game weeks, so we've got a good sample of data to work with now. Between myself and Greg, we crunch the numbers for you. Greg's built these amazing models that goes through all of the fixture difficulty ratings over the next few weeks, the best captaincy choices, the best players to target over the next few weeks. And I crunched the XG and XGC numbers to look at which teams are performing well at the moment. And so we'll bring you the best captaincy candidates for the upcoming game week. And we'll also let you know which fixtures to target for game week 10 as well. But before we do that, let's have a recap of our teams from last week. So Greg, welcome back, man. How did your team do over this last weekend?
Thanks, Clyde. It was another good week. This wildcard has really been a great success. Another green arrow for me. I got
Those
66
are rare
points.
words. My wildcard was a success.
It surprised me the most. Don't you worry. It's been really good. I got 66 points, well above the average. I went up from around 7,600th to 2,600th in rank. So quite strongly in the top 10k, which is exactly where I want to be at this stage of the season. And yeah, my defense really outperformed. Didn't get much from my attackers this week, but James, Chilwell, Ramsdale, Livramento all came to the party. So yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah, that's amazing. Imagine to get 21 points off your one defender. That just sets the tone so nicely for the rest of your game week. But like you say, it's been such defensive heavy performances over the last few weeks. It's almost like every point that you get from your attackers is almost like bonus at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, James and Chilwell have been absolute gold. I took a bit of a risk when I put them in my wildcard side, just because whether they were going to play was very uncertain. And the first game after my wildcard, James was benched and only came on for a 1 minute cameo. But I kept the faith, and wow, the two of them have returned huge numbers for me in the last few weeks. So really happy with that decision.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about bench strength so much over the last few weeks as well. And I mean, now, just look at it, right? You've got James, Chilwell. I mean, in my case, okay, I didn't have James, but I had Chilwell and Christensen. But it just shows that, especially with these, high ceiling players, if you just have a good bench, it affords you the opportunity to really take punts on these players, and being able to capitalize on these big scores, knowing that okay, if they don't play, you have some bench cover as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that might be my transfer this week, just to even further firm up my bench, just to make sure when guys like Foden get rested, or James or Chilwell or Cancelo, that I've got cover. But obviously I've got my stalwarts that are getting 90 minutes every week, but there are some rotation risks, and I think if you've got a decent bench, then you're happy to take those risks.
Yeah, in my case, well, I got to 57 points, so green arrows, I suppose. Not the biggest green arrow, but I effectively reversed my red arrow from the previous week. So I'm down to like around the two, what's it now? Let me have a look here. It's 243. So the previous week, 2 weeks ago, I was 244. Then I went to 350, and now I'm in 243. So that's fine. And again, like, I suppose mine was slightly different to yours, where I didn't have James, but I did have Chilwell. But the two players that came through for me was Rafinha and Raul Jimenez with 9 points each. So yeah, they were the two players that actually kind of negated the James points, if that makes sense, because a lot of people had gone off Rafinha. Rafinha had a price drop on Friday, between Friday and Saturday night. Can you believe it? And,
I mean, there were so many people that I spoke to that were thinking about and actually transferring out Rafinha, and I kept saying, but he's playing Norwich, and basically we got the news that he's going to play. So I mean, it was just a mad transfer to anyone. Like, I obviously didn't have him in my side, but he was certainly a guy that I would never have been thinking about transferring out.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't have necessarily bought him just for one fixture, but if I have him, I'm definitely going to keep him. So yeah, and then Braja got injured. Armando Braja got injured, so which means Adam Armstrong played, and he got an assist, but he got stuck on my bench. And the last player on my bench was Omo Bamidele, who actually scored and got 10 points against Leeds. So I had 15 points sitting on my bench, but the one player who did come off my bench was Livramento for those 6 points because Mbeumo didn't play. So again, we spoke about bench strength and so on. So all in all, like, I think the only unreliable player in my squad, if Adam Armstrong plays, is Omo Bamidele. But yeah, I think I'm really happy with the strength of my squad at the moment. I never shot out the lights this week by any means with my scores. But I mean, if I look at this week, I think 57 was a really good score this week, considering that the average was only 42. So yeah, in fact, I'm much more happy with this score than I was with the 80 points from the previous week.
Yeah, it all depends on the average, doesn't it? And yeah, there are different ways to get ahead and build that rank. And thankfully for me, the defenders came through this week, and then I've got Salah, Foden, Son, Antonio, Wilson, and Tony. It's their turn to shine this week, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Son is the one for me where it's almost like he's playing on the edge. He's always so close to getting you those points.
Yeah, and hopefully now with the big managerial shake-up, obviously with Nuno getting sacked and Conte arriving now at Spurs, I think we could see a revitalized Spurs team. So I'm really hoping. I'm hoping that my early pick of Son comes through now, because he's got some great fixtures coming up.
I must say, like, I've had Son now for effectively, out of the 10 game weeks, maybe like 6 of them so far. And yeah, it's like these last 2 weeks have definitely tested my patience. But I felt, with the fixture swing for Spurs coming up, it just makes sense to hold it. It doesn't make any sense to really worry too much. And he's the type of player, like I was saying just now, he plays on the edge. So you just wouldn't be surprised if he pitches up with a goal in the next game out of nothing, even if it's just one shot on target.
Yeah, I would expect him. Look, my model agrees that in terms of the next 6 game weeks, he's ranked as the third best pick. So I would expect some big points from Sonny in the next 6 for sure.
Yeah. Now let's talk about captaincy ahead of game week 10. So after the 200% effective ownership of Salah this past weekend, where I think just to talk about this over here, so there was this podcast I was listening to last season. I can't remember what's the name, and I really need to go and find it. But they were doing this. They were recording this episode where just their followers put in recommendations of what they would change about FPL. Okay, and one of the things that kept on coming up was remove captaincy from FPL, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But it does kind of make sense because it takes the luck element out of the game, right? And so I can see why people want to get rid of it. And this past weekend was basically an experiment of what FPL would be like if you take out captaincy from the game.
You're taking captaincy out the game, and basically you're saying you've only got 10 players to play with, because you really can't be anywhere without Salah. And it's amazing. In my model, his numbers are absolutely ridiculous. I think he's almost double the player that's in second place on my model. Like, it's that big how much better he is than everyone else.
Yeah.
You can't not have him. You can't not captain him. So it's basically just Salah captain every week. And like I tweeted this week, it's a catch-22 because you can't win with him as captain and you can't win without him.
So you
Because
just rank shield with him and move on.
I mean, it takes a man with some giant kahunas to not captain Salah, because you just know you're going to get hurt, and that's the problem. If his effective ownership is 200% and you don't captain him, and he comes through with a big week, your rank is going to plummet.
Yeah.
So I think you just pretty much have to stick the armband on him. You obviously make sure he's in your team, and you really worry about the rest of your team and hope that the rest of your players can make a difference.
Yeah, look, so going into this week, we know that Liverpool play West Ham, which they haven't had the best defensive performances anyway. And Liverpool tend to have an okay record against West Ham over the last few seasons, if I remember correctly. So is he your captaincy pick for this weekend?
He has to be. There's just no other option really. I can't see myself not putting the armband on Salah.
So Son versus Everton by any chance?
Look, I mean, if we're looking at other options, I think James is certainly an option from Chelsea. If you're looking for another spicy pick,
He's a spicy pick right there.
we've been speaking about sort of defenders and the old rule of never captaining a defender. But in the past few weeks, Chilwell and James have popped up on the model as realistic captaincy options. And they've performed. I mean, it's difficult when Salah's getting 24 pointers, but Chilwell got 12 points the week before. James got 21 points last week. They are realistic options when they've got such a high clean sheet percentage and such a high chance of scoring goals. So I would definitely give James and Chilwell a shout out for this week as options. And then I think your other two sort of realistic options are Tony from Brentford playing against Norwich. Basically, anyone playing Norwich is an option at this point. And then Son's probably the next best. So I think any of those are really good options, but do it at your own risk against Salah at the moment.
Yeah, I've already gotten my fingers burnt twice this season against Manchester City and against Manchester United. So I'm not in the mood for that anymore. I think I'm just gonna. It's two games, pivotal games, and double-digit hauls, massive hauls, where I can tell you that like the variance was so much between captaining and not captaining that if I had captained him in just those two games, I'd probably be in the top 50,000 now. And I'm actually 243. So that's how much it's cost me. Just those two captaincy picks from those two game weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing because obviously the model I've built is relatively new. I've only really finished tweaking it in sort of in the first sort of 6 or 7 game weeks this season, and it had Salah against City as the obvious captain pick, and I just didn't believe it. And I think I went for someone else, and I think I went for Lukaku or one of the other options. And it's just so interesting that when you just look at pure stats, unemotional numbers, that just how good he is, even against a team like City, who was rated the best defense at the time, that he's just too good not to captain, even against a defense that good.
Yeah, exactly. And just to confirm, I opened up the live FPL website now as well, and it's exactly that. I'm 32 points off the top 50k. So had I just stuck to my guns initially and tried not to be too clever over it, just those two captaincy picks alone that is how much the variance was. It's the difference between a place in the top 50k and is effectively 200k, and you can essentially cover from number 1 to number 1 million with a blanket at the moment. I think because the rankings are so tight. But I think right now, I wouldn't be gambling on trying to chase after points because the gaps are so tight between these rankings as well that I just don't think that right now it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just captain Salah and focus on really improving the rest of your squad.
Yeah. Okay, now let's have a look at this upcoming game week's fixtures. So we've got Southampton and Aston Villa first up on a Friday night kickoff. I mean, we haven't hid our excitement for Friday night kickoff. We love those, right? So
so much better than the Monday night fixtures.
Exactly, man. I hate those. So Southampton have been defending really well, and on the contrary, Aston Villa have been quite crap. I don't know what's going on over there. But this is an interesting one because, okay, Watkins scored, and I know you're quite a big fan of him, right? I mean, you've spoken about him quite a bit. But again, results-wise, it's not going their way. Ings is injured, I think, now. He wasn't in the squad this past weekend. And so what do you make of this fixture? I mean, there's a few Southampton players that are really starting to come into our thinking apart from Livramento, of course. So, yeah.
Yeah, when you look at the numbers, there's not much that's going to separate these two teams. They're both pretty much exactly 37% to win the game. Aston Villa 26% for a clean sheet, Southampton 26%. So it really sort of lends itself towards a 1-1 type of fixture. It's not ranked very highly on my number of goals per fixture ticker either. So I would expect a low scoring. Southampton's defense has been pretty good, and their attack's been pretty bad. So I think between that and Aston Villa's bad defense and sort of average attack, I think it's going to sort of cancel each other out. And yeah, I would expect somewhere around a 1-1 result. But there's not much really from a player perspective. I mean, if you've got Livramento, I think you're happy to have him as sort of your first bench option or second bench option. And if we look at the Aston Villa attackers, Watkins is certainly up there. I think that the guy that I'm really keenly watching at the moment is Leon Bailey. I think that I sort of expect a lot from him. He's popped up quite highly on the model. So when Aston Villa's fixtures get a bit better, at the moment they've still got Brighton, City and Liverpool and Leicester in the next 6. So the fixtures aren't great for them. So I would expect when those fixtures do improve that guys like Watkins and Bailey become real options. But for the moment, I think I would be sort of steering clear of both teams, to be honest.
Okay, so I'm quite happy that you mentioned Livramento as the bench option, because the next question I was going to ask was the benching headache that we're also creating for ourselves with having these stronger benches as well. Like, I think you started off with 5 defenders last week, right? So
yeah, the old reverse Christmas tree formation.
Christmas tree.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've played 5 defenders starting, but it worked out. And the funny part was that the 2 guys that I really expected to score the most, which were Trent and Cancelo, actually got the fewest points out of all my defenders. So
if they all, you would have been getting to 100 points or something like that.
It would have been a big week for sure, but. We can't rely on the defenders week in, week out. So I'm going to be back to 4 at the back for this week. But yeah, when it comes to Aston Villa and Southampton, there's not too much that's exciting to talk about. I think pretty much, like I said, Livramento on the bench and hope that you don't really need him.
Right, and okay, and then on to the Saturday fixture. So we've got a crack over here. United versus City. So that now City are kind of looking last 2 games maybe. Well, okay, West Ham was the League Cup, and then obviously and then there was the league game, which what happened over there we don't know. But Crystal Palace seem to have performed some. They have some good performances against City over the last few seasons, if I remember correctly as well. So sometimes it could just be a bogey team type of thing. But what do you make of this fixture? Because we saw United playing with the 3-5-2 system, the Antonio Conte system as well. So do you think that they're going to try and deploy this against City as well?
I mean, it's going to be interesting because Solskjaer is under immense pressure at the moment to hold on to his job. But I think even though City had a bad a bad week against Palace, and I mean very, very, very big upset that for Palace to win that game. But City are 58% to win this game. United are only 20%. So you've got to think that City are going to come through and show their class. A class team like themselves aren't gonna make mistakes 2 weeks in a row. City at 34% for a clean sheet, where United are all the way down at 14%. So I would be targeting or at least holding on to City assets if you've got them. Don't be tempted not to play guys like Cancelo and Foden. I think against a sort of struggling United team, one decent result doesn't mean that they're anywhere at the moment. Spurs have been pretty diabolical lately, so I wouldn't really attach too much credence to the result they had last week. So I think it's going to be goals, second highest on the goals ranking. So I think we'll see lots of goals, and I think City are the guys that you want to be focusing on.
Okay, so when you're predicting goals, you're predicting goals for both teams, or are you predicting all the goals for City over here?
Well, like I said, I mean, City are 34% for a clean sheet, so I mean, it's not the highest number. It's not near like the Chelsea 56% this week, but it's not bad. So I would expect goals from City, and I think don't count United out for scoring, one or two. But I would see a result here of, if I had to call a result, I think sort of 3-1 City would be my thinking.
Okay, so in other words, you're saying if you have a City defender or City players, just play them. But if you don't have them, this is not the week to go and buy them.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be buying City defenders this week. I think you've got better spots, but I think most people have Cancelo and Foden or one of the City attackers, and I think you're just happily keeping them this week. I'd be surprised if City don't get any returns.
Okay, yeah, the one player that I'm looking at that I'm quite interested in is Gabriel Jesus. Now, I don't need him because I have Foden as well, I brought Foden in last week for Demarai Gray, so, that was a way for me to strengthen my squad overall as well. But, Jesus is the one. I don't see him talked about a lot, but he seems to be getting returns this season, and he's a good price as well.
Yeah, interestingly enough, my model doesn't really like him at all. He's not even, I think, in the top 25 players.
No, I've seen that as well. That's
for
what
the
I
next
thought.
6 weeks. Yeah. So I think numbers wise, look, he's playing in a different position this season, and he seems to be a little bit more effective. But if you're going for a City attacker, I think Foden is the guy to go for at the moment. Yeah. There's always going to be some rotation, but. And City's a difficult team to navigate in general, but Grealish is just not performing this season at all. So although his numbers from last season are so fantastic, I think you got to go with the informed player, which is Phil Foden.
Yeah, tell me about Grealish. I know all about it. I held him for like 6 weeks before I got rid. But yeah, look, I suppose it was worth the chance. The numbers were good, to be fair, and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way,
Yeah, form is a funny thing. Like his numbers are still very good this season, but his conversion is terrible.
Yeah, I mean he was so close to scoring against Brighton, I think it was, and he got the assist as well. And and I moved him out of my team that week, and I was watching that game. I saw a little bit of the first half especially, and I really feared for the fact that I just took him out and he's gonna haul double digits. And it was like he was playing on the edge, but that's exactly how he played even when I had him in my team as well. You always looked at it and you saw the shots on target, and you're thinking it's just a matter of time where they start going in. But yeah, it just never translated into actual goals or actual points.
Yeah, I think it'll come, but with FPL you always have to try and target players that are on form, that are in form.
And Foden is that guy.
Yeah, at the moment that's Foden, and yes, he blanked last week, but hopefully he gets another start and can do some damage against United.
Yeah. Now Brentford and Norwich. So a lot of us have brought in the likes of Tony Mbeumo, maybe Pinnock or Pontus Jansson as well. and they got turned over badly by Burnley last week, and they got a draw. Was it a draw against Leicester, I think, as well? But they've still got two good fixtures coming up in Norwich and Newcastle. So are you still keen on, like, if you don't have a Brentford player in your team right now, are you still keen on jumping onto these next two fixtures?
Yeah, I think Tony is certainly a must. He's fourth on my model at the moment overall, which at his price tag at 6.6 million is just basically for free. So I think you definitely need one of Tony and Mbeumo, and potentially both. I'm never a big fan of the double ups. I'd rather spread my risk a little bit, but I think Tony is looking fantastic.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest and say that I don't trust Brentford enough to go with that double up. I think I'm happy sticking with the one player from there, because I just don't know. Maybe it's my famous last words now, and they'll both go in hall, similar to what they did against Wolves a few weeks back. But it's like when I watch them, they always feel, again, like they're so close to getting the points. But I still feel like maybe it's just a gut feel that I just want to stick to one player from there for now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. They've got good fixtures, and I think their numbers are incredible. But maybe just picking one and going with it is the way to do it.
Yeah, and also we'll cover those other teams for now. But I was looking at your fixture difficulty ratings for the next, is it 5 or 6 game weeks, and there's one or two players like. Arsenal have Watford and Newcastle in the next 3. Crystal Palace have a few good fixtures in the next 4 or 5 games as well. And I think by allowing myself to target some of those fixtures as well, then jumping onto one Brentford player might help, because it leaves space for midfielders from Arsenal or Crystal Palace like Gallagher or Zaha as well.
Yeah, I mean Zaha was. I took him out for the City fixture and brought Son in, and it came back to bite me in the ass. But I think he would have been on my bench anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things where it's like we can debate the Salah captaincy against Manchester City or Manchester United as well. There's sometimes where you look at that decision and you just know that deep down it was the right one, but it's a power of hindsight again, that you can just not foresee some of those type of results happening. I mean, Zaha getting returns against City, just imagine.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, he's really looking good in the model for the next few, and I think him or Gallagher are great options. Gallagher's stats this season are really, really good. So I think I might be going with the cheaper option. Looking at strengthening my bench and bringing Gallagher in this week. But I mean, if you can afford Zaha, I think he is still the main man and probably the best guy from Palace to have.
Yeah, look, I have Rafinha in my team who, it's Leeds. They haven't been playing well this season, So, and with the team so reliant on like Rafinha and Bamford, I feel like that, Rafinha was good to me this season, it's now like 4 goals in 10 appearances, which is nothing to be sniffed at. But it just feels like the type of player who will hold me back from like being able to unlock the potential of another team's good fixture run or something like that.
Yeah, Leeds fixtures don't look fantastic coming up. Yeah. I think their attacking fixtures are only rated 16th for the next 6. They've got Leicester, Spurs, Brighton, Brentford, Chelsea, and can't even write off Crystal Palace either at the moment. They've actually looked relatively good this season defensively. So I think for me the Leeds players are sort of I think you want to be rotating out of Leeds for the next little while.
Yeah,
and looking at some other options.
Yeah, and then Norwich, as I said, Bamidele on my bench, 10 points. Now is essential as far as I'm concerned. Now, look, you know what? Yeah, that was one of those. It was so annoying, right? Because I never watched the game, but somebody tweeted something like where Rafinha was on the 3 bonus points and Bamidele was on 2. and then he tackled Rafinha, and then they swapped their bonus points around. So I ended up getting the 9 instead of getting 10 for Rafinha. I ended up getting 9 points.
Yeah, it was like in the last minute of the game or something as well.
Yeah, it was something like that over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, fine margins between one player in my starting 11 and one on my bench who's not gonna come on.
Exactly.
So yeah, those are some of the worst. So yeah. So yeah, and then Chelsea and Burnley. Now, obviously, we've been raving about Chelsea defender. I've seen a few teams with triple Chelsea defense, and I cannot blame them because Chelsea defense are so awesome at the moment. But it does feel excessive, but completely understandable. So let me ask you this, Greg. Now, you know, we spoke about not doubling up on players, but how do you feel about tripling up on Chelsea defense?
I think the triple up might be a little bit too much for my brain to handle. I've doubled up on Chelsea defense since my wild card, and I mean their numbers are just so incredible. They've only conceded 3 goals their entire season,
and the fact that these 2 defenders are effectively midfielders just makes it's a bonus as well.
I mean, effectively forwards at times, and that's the thing. And I mean, Chelsea this week are 56% for a clean sheet. In the next 6 fixtures, they've got Watford at 58% and Leeds at 53%. I mean, their clean sheet forecasts are just through the roof. So I can certainly understand the triple up. For me, I think double up is probably the way to go. And Burnley, I mean, they should wipe the floor with Burnley this week. They really have been brilliant, and I think they're 75% at winning probability this week against Burnley. So it really is a huge number. So I think it's difficult to pick a Chelsea attacker at this point. You know, Havertz has been not that great.
You have to say it. You have to use the line.
I'm a Havnotz. I'm definitely a Havnotz, and that was purely based on the numbers. His numbers just weren't showing any real potential when Lukaku got injured and Werner got injured. And there doesn't seem to be anyone who's, you know, numbers wise that really sticks out from an attacking perspective. So I think sticking with the defenders is the way to go with the Chelsea guys.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about it a few weeks ago as well, where I said I'm not so keen on Lukaku anymore, and it's amazing how just within the space of 3 or 4 game weeks, you know, your opinion can change. But look, I understand, like, if Lukaku was fit, you know, the not going with him in this run of fixtures would be one of those where you'd really have to say all of your prayers and hope that it comes to pass. But even then, like, I look at it and I'm just not convinced that any of the attackers are going to be hauling that big enough to say, okay, we're going to regret it. I still feel like the defense is so good even for the attacking potential that I'd sacrifice somebody like Lukaku even for them.
Yeah, look, I think if I was to pick one, I would probably go for Mason Mount. You know, obviously it was very unlucky that he was ill last week and didn't play, so I'd be keeping an eye on the press conferences to make sure that he's back and fully fit. But I think if you had to choose a Chelsea attacker, he's definitely the best value. And I think I wouldn't be expecting the big haul that he had a couple of weeks ago. But he looks like the best value Chelsea pick.
Yeah, I suppose that you're talking about, what's he, like 7.5 or something around that region, right?
Yeah, he's in the mid-7s, somewhere around there.
And if you look at a mid-7s, I mean, if you're getting steady returns of assist here and a goal over there, some bonus points along the way, I mean, that's what you'd essentially expect from that type of player in that price range.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then Crystal Palace and Wolves. Now, I mean, I've spoken about Raul Jimenez, you know, just holding him for this past few weeks. And I've had him since, I think, Gameweek 3, Gameweek 4. I know you had him early in the season, right? And then I think you wildcarded him out or something like that. But, you know, I've to be honest with you, the only reason why I've held on to him for that long is because of the fact that I've always had some other fire to put out in my team. But again, like, when I looked at Wolves fixtures, I never thought of it as great, but I never thought of it as bad. It was kind of like these average fixtures. But I just felt that if they're going to have some attacking returns, then surely Jimenez has to be part of it, whether it's an assist or whether it's a goal. And I haven't been wrong so far because he's now had 5 returns in his last 4 games. In fact, since I've had him, he's only blanked in 2 games. It was a game against Brentford, which was the first game that I've had him. And then the next time he blanked was when he came on for 1 minute at the ending of the game.
Yeah, he's looked really good. And I think if you've got Jimenez or Hwang, you want to be holding on for that Norwich Burnley game week 13 and game week 14. That comes up soon, yeah. And I think you can then really get ready to burn when game week 15 rolls around and you've got Liverpool and then City.
Atrocious run. I remember seeing it. I can't remember the fixtures, but I know it's just not great.
Yeah, so I would be holding on till game week 14 and then be looking to rotate out of those players. But for the moment they look good. Unfortunately this week the stats don't look that great. Crystal Palace versus Wolves is the lowest scoring fixture out of all of them by quite some distance. So I think, definitely a low scoring fixture. And we've got not much to separate the two teams, both around 35% to win the game. Quite a high draw percentage. So, I'd say hold on to your Wolves. If you've got, like I said, Jimenez or Hwang, I think you're going to be holding on. And then... it's difficult to sort of really find any Crystal Palace like we spoke about. We spoke about Gallagher and Zaha. I think those two guys are great options, but again, they're not going to shoot lights out, and you're not going to get massive returns from them. But as budget enablers, I think Gallagher looks like the way to go for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. I think maybe after this Wolves game, there are some, after the international break, there's some nice fixtures coming up for Palace, and that's when I'm going to really seriously start considering getting them into my team.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the last game on the Saturday fixtures is Brighton and Newcastle. Now, Brighton gave us heart palpitations on the weekend. They played really well, to be fair. You know, they played like the game that we expected the previous week, but I won't go there. But look, they were quite amazing. They pressed well in the second half and so on. But I saw that you put out some infographics earlier today, I think it was, and Trossard came up as on your list of budget enablers as well. So I've never trusted Brighton attackers enough to ever consider them, that seriously as well. Apart from maybe, I think it was last season, there was a blank game week and I played my free hit and then I brought Trossard in and he did very well, but against Newcastle, you'll expect them to put away a few of those goals. Maybe score more than they've been scoring recently. Do you expect that to be the case over here?
Yeah, I mean, against Liverpool, it really was a game of two halves. Liverpool were all over Brighton in the first half, and then they came back and I think they were unlucky not to win the game in the end of it. But Brighton guys are looking pretty decent. I think, the two players that have really popped up on my model have been Trossard, like you spoke about, and the other one is Cucurella in defence. So
I've been very impressed by him as well. I thought he was 4.5, and then I saw his price is 5 million. I was like, oh man. But I've been very, very impressed with him, and he looks like when I've seen him play, he's so involved, even attacking wise, that if he does get a return or they get a clean sheet, he looks like he'll be a bonus points magnet as well.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent against Salah in particular last week, and. Look, I think it is frustrating that he is a little bit more expensive and he is 5 million. But I think all of our defenders at the moment, we've pretty much everyone's going premium at this stage. So he's definitely one to consider. And the Brighton fixtures look pretty decent, like you said. Newcastle, Aston Villa, Leeds. Then they've got a tough game against West Ham and then Southampton and Spurs afterwards. So I definitely think that the Brighton players will surprise a lot. And like I said, I think Trossard and Cucurella are really the ones to target if you are going Brighton.
And when I saw when you released the fixture difficulty ratings earlier today, The first thing I did, I must admit, is go and check Cucurella because when I saw the defensive the fixture difficulty, because he was the player that actually jumped out the most. So yeah, I'm actually quite relieved that your model agrees. So yeah. Yeah, and then Newcastle, I suppose, if you have somebody like Wilson, you probably just hold for now, or you can play him in this fixture, I suppose.
Yeah, I benched him against Chelsea, but I think he's probably good enough to be playing against Brighton, and he's still very highly rated in my model, and he's been consistently returning. When he's been fit, he's been scoring pretty much a goal a game. So yeah, I think if you're going to go Newcastle, I think Wilson's pretty much your only option. And I think with the Norwich fixture in game week 14 and Burnley in game week 15, it seems to be this Norwich-Burnley fixture for everyone that keeps coming around. And
yeah, those are the ones who kind of look out for. It's like, okay, I'm bringing a player for those two.
Exactly. I'm certainly going to be holding on to him for the moment, and I think he will still get decent returns against some of the tougher teams. If Newcastle score, he seems to be the guy who's involved, which is great.
All right, and then on Sunday fixtures, Arsenal versus Watford. Now, I was speaking about it earlier where I said I think Arsenal play, on either side of after the international break, they play Liverpool and then Newcastle, and then they've got Watford now. So in that three fixtures, there's a potential for players like Saka and Smith Rowe to come into contention as well. And so yeah, I mean, and then obviously there'll be there's Nuno Tavares, who's played at fullback for them for the last few games as well. He's quite cheap. And then Tomiyasu, not much attacking potential, but he seems to be quite popular in the game as well from what I've seen. And then there's obviously Ramsdale. So, but the defenders, yeah, I suppose you can make a case for one or two of them. But it's specifically the attackers that I'm more interested in, because you've seen people jump onto Smith Rowe recently. He's had these price rises and so on. Do you think it's warranted to bring them in for this next run of fixtures?
It is quite interesting because Smith Rowe, he really looked good in the games that I've watched, but at the same time, his XG numbers have been relatively low, and his sort of delta percentage or conversion of those chances has been incredibly high, and that's generally not very sustainable. Today I compared Smith Rowe to Gallagher and boosted the current season data just to get a feel for more this season how have the two of them been performing, and Gallagher far outperforms Smith Rowe. So for me the pick is Gallagher over Smith Rowe, but I can certainly see the sort of people wanting to jump onto Smith Rowe with the fixtures that you mentioned.
Unless you go short-term picks, and you'd probably try and get onto both of them at once.
Yeah, you can. You certainly can. But I think Smith Rowe, I'm not convinced on. Just from a numbers perspective, I don't expect him to continue his conversion rates at that sort of percentage, and because of that, he doesn't pop up very highly on my model at the moment. So for me, it's still a wait and see.
And even with Saka, I felt like he's been missing some very good chances as well. So I'm not really convinced on him either.
Yeah, it's the same story for me. He also doesn't feature very highly on the model, and it's all about numbers and conversion rates and being able to sustain long-term returns. And Saka just it doesn't. He will bring that week where he gets a goal and goal and assist, and everyone sort of flies onto him. But I think that's already happened this season, where everyone's wanted to jump onto Saka, and then he did nothing for a few weeks, and everyone jumped off. And I think that's in general one of the more dangerous things in FPL, is trying to jump onto these bandwagons that are unproven. And there's really nothing to stress about. These guys are cheap players. If they rise in price and you miss out in a few weeks, it's far better to wait for confirmed assets and jump on a little bit later than it is to worry about being there first.
Yeah. And then Watford, I suppose, is a no-go for now, right?
Yeah, look, Watford aren't featuring at all, and I think mainly because, I mean, if you look at this week, they've only got a 15% of a chance of a clean sheet. So I mean, you're not looking at any defensive assets. Most people have Foster, who's firmly rooted to the bench, and I would say don't make the mistake that a lot of people made last week of playing Foster over Ramsdale.
I couldn't believe that, honestly. Yeah. Wow. That was just incredible. Yeah.
It was very surprising because the clean sheet numbers were quite clear that Arsenal were favourites over Watford. So I was very surprised to see a lot of people do that.
And that's one of those reasons why I just don't feel like having rotating goalkeepers is just ever worth the hassle anyway.
Yeah, I think you've got to just say Foster's my backup keeper, and it's nice to have if something happens and he's forced to play. But I would keep him rooted firmly to the bench.
Yeah.
And I mean, Arsenal are 64% to win the game against Watford. I don't think you're really going to be jumping on any Watford attackers at this stage either. And the problem is that if you have a look at their fixtures, they look diabolical. Arsenal, United, Leicester, Chelsea, City, Brentford in the next 6. I think you just want to steer well clear of any Watford players.
Yeah, wow, that's a crazy run right there. I didn't even bother looking at Watford's fixtures at all. So now that you told me about it,
stone last.
Yeah, and then Everton and Spurs. So Spurs were trash. They were really bad on the weekend, right? They looked so uninspired. But, now we have Son. So, naturally, I was hoping that, okay, just even if something just bounces, whatever happens, let it just be Son who gets that goal, right? But now he's playing against an Everton team who have been slipping these past few weeks. Now maybe there's a new manager bounce or whatever it is, and people talk about it as if it really means something. But look, this is a really world-class manager now. Do you expect to see now throughout the timeline today? I've seen people talking about Kane, Reguilon, like already kind of preempting that. Okay, there's going to be this wing-back system, 3-5-2 or whatever. Should we consider jumping onto these players in a few weeks' time or whatever? And look, I understand everybody's looking to jump onto the next kind of bandwagon early, but do you think that in the short term that could be the new manager bounce or whatever is going to make that much of a difference?
I think it will have a big impact, the new manager, but I wouldn't be jumping on Spurs' defensive assets. I think Son is, for me, the out-and-out clear option to have in your team. Kane's stats have been relatively poor, and remember, they include last season's stats as well. So, I'm not at his price tag. I think for me, Kane is still an avoid. I think Son's the guy to go for, and just hope that things improve, and then you can start looking at when Spurs have a decent defensive run coming up. I think when from Norwich onwards, or even Brentford onwards. But I would be just waiting, and I wouldn't be jumping on those defensive assets just yet. They haven't looked good, and the clean sheet forecasts for the defensive guys isn't great. So for now, I would be sticking with the tried and tested Chelsea defense. Guys like Trent that you just can't go without, and looking at Son in particular from an attacking perspective.
Yeah, and then Everton. Well, I suppose look, we've never been too keen on their defenders since the beginning of the season. We've had like Demarai Gray as a budget enabler. Well, I removed him last week, like I said, for Foden, and like apart from that, over there, Calvert-Lewin out, Richarlison just coming back from injury. They also seem like the type of team you just avoid at the moment, right?
Yeah, I would be avoiding them. There doesn't seem to be any sort of consistent return from any of the Everton players. Like you said, the defence has been diabolical. It's been worse than what we even thought it would be, quite obviously. And coming up, I mean, their defensive ranking is 15th for the next 6 fixtures. So I think steer well clear. I think we called Everton and Leeds quite well in terms of defensive assets this season, because a lot of people were very keen on them at the start of the season. We said avoid, and they really have been avoids the entire season.
And we've said avoid West Ham defense as well. They were the
Yes.
one, and we're spot on with that as well. Yeah. Okay, and then talking about Leeds and Leicester is the next one. There's another defense that should I talk about Schmeichel again?
I think your 0 points lasted 5 minutes or 13 minutes last
Wow,
week.
just imagine. So he got the 3 saves that gave me another 1 point. Really spoiling me again. So he's got 2 points, one for appearance, and he got a -1 for conceding 2, but then made it up by getting the 3 saves. But yeah, look, I'm going to put it out there. I transferred him out. I made an early transfer this week, which I know we spoke about this before, but looking at the price changes, I allowed a few price increases to happen because I had money in the bank, but because I did Gray to Foden, I kind of used up a lot of my money in the bank, right? So I still had a little bit, but I couldn't afford to lose too much more. So I decided to just move out Schmeichel and get Ramsdale in. And then his price went up after that anyway.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good move. I think, like we spoke about before, Ramsdale looks like the best value keeper at the moment. And as his price goes up, that obviously, makes him less valuable.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think you've been super unlucky with Schmeichel. The Leicester defense has just been really diabolical in the last 6 or 7 weeks.
I mean, even players like Johnny Evans, his form has fallen off a cliff. So Yunshu was so good previous seasons. He's not playing that well anymore. Fofana is unlucky that he's got a long-term injury. But overall, it just hasn't worked. None of the players, Castagna, Pereira, they've all just completely... Either they've vastly overperformed previous seasons, or they're vastly underperforming now. Maybe the answer lies somewhere in between as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I think your patience ran out and you had to get rid of him. But I wouldn't expect much from the Leicester defense going forward.
Yeah, and look, you know what? It's not just one fixture or whatever. I think where I decided to pull the trigger on and get rid of Schmeichel is that it's not 1 or 2 fixtures. It's a gradual loss of points week after week after week, where that slow drain of 2 points here, 3 points here. Cumulatively, if I had to go for the other 2 goalkeepers, which were high on my list, Raya and Ramsdale, I would have probably collected about maybe about 20 points more, 30 points possibly. And I think that's why I decided to finally make that change. And also because, at that 0.4 difference, it's money in the bank again that I can use on other transfers as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you want your goalkeeper to be set and forget. You don't want to have to be worrying about the fact that you're just getting no defensive returns ever from your goalkeeper. So, yeah, I think fair enough.
Yeah, and like I said, those short-term fixtures for Arsenal look good as well. So, yeah, it works out well. And then, so Leicester at the moment, I think apart from Vardy, I think it's safe to say they are no-go at the moment, right?
Yeah, look, Vardy's looking decent, as he always does, and his numbers are very good. He's ranked 6th on my model for the next 6 weeks. The only thing that's tough is his price tag, 10.8 million. So if you can fit him in, that's great.
He's 10.8 now.
Yeah, he's gone up significantly, and Son at 10.2 has to be a far better option in my opinion. So certainly not a bad forward to have. He is only second behind Tony for the next 6 weeks. So I think having Vardy is not a bad option, but he is going to stretch your funds a little bit thin.
Yeah, and then we spoke about Leeds just now, where they're just an avoid at the moment, right? And then the last fixture, Liverpool going to West Ham. They now, like I said, Liverpool have like I said, not a bad record against West Ham by any means, but yeah. So defensively, though we've been keeping a lot of clean sheets, not always. We do offer up a lot of big chances. What do you think about this fixture? Now, I've seen a lot of people looking at West Ham's run over the next few weeks and are saying, and are strongly considering selling Antonio. And some people, look, I feel like if you're going to have a player like Antonio, you're definitely not going to bench him, right? It just makes no sense. So you either keep him or sell him. Or play him or sell him, but you're not going to bench him. So, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about this before. I think I know your thoughts on it. But anyway, let's talk about it. Do you think keep or sell?
I would say keep. I think, even against, I mean, this fixture against Liverpool is going to be the goal fest fixture of the week. Certainly the most goals I predicted out of any of the fixtures.
From one side or both sides? I just need to understand this.
From both sides. Obviously, Liverpool being the favourites. Liverpool are 59% to win the game, whereas West Ham are only 20%.
Yeah.
So definitely big favourites for Liverpool. But you've got to, I think, like you said, Liverpool are giving up a lot of big chances. And West Ham attack has been really, really good. They've scored tons of goals this season. You've got Antonio, who I would be happily playing this week, and then I think you've also got some other options that are popping up, and one of them for me is Bowen. His numbers have looked incredibly good, and I think in terms of budget enablers, I think when their fixtures do get better, he's certainly someone that I'm going to consider. Even going against my double up rule with attackers, but when they've got decent run of fixtures, I think at 6.3 million, he looks really, really good. So I think definitely one to keep in the back of your mind is Bowen.
That's an interesting one, because even last season there were times where I looked at it and thought, wow, he seems to like get this double-digit haul in one game. Then if you really have patience with him, then all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 games later, he pops up with another one. But it's like he had these high points returns, but like big returns in one game. It wasn't consistent at all. Yeah. So but I've seen his return in like last 4 games or something like that. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, he really does look good, and I mean he's very similar to Rafinha in terms of stats. So I think when the fixtures improve, if West Ham do have good fixtures, definitely one to keep on your mind.
Okay, and then to wrap up, I suppose with Liverpool, everybody knows Salah, Trent, and that's about it, really, right?
Well, I think at some point, when do we start considering Sadio Mane? Because I think his biggest issue at the moment is just the lack of bonus points. But I think Sadio Mane has been firmly rooted to the number 2 spot on my model the entire season, and he's been scoring a huge number of points.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's been putting us off him is the fact that no penalties, which penalties haven't been that much this season anyway, right? But also then the bonus points and the fact that he plays in the same team as Salah. But also I think that price point just makes him so prohibitive at the moment.
The price tag is really difficult. I think that's the biggest thing that people are avoiding is, at 11.9 million, you everyone has Salah, you're forced to have Salah, so now you're doubling up, which is never great, like we've spoken about before. And at 11.9 million, wow, it's a tough thing to have him and Salah in your team and still have any sort of semblance of balance in the rest of your side. So I think that's why his ownership is so low. If he was around 10 million, I think he'd almost be a must-have. So I think it's purely the price tag that's keeping him out at the moment.
Exactly. Like you mentioned 10 million, and then you're putting him in the same bracket as Son. Yeah. And then it becomes a straight shootout, like which one do you want? And if you really, really can stretch it, you could possibly have Salah, Son and Mane in the same team.
Exactly.
If he was around that 10 million mark.
I think if he was around that mark, you'd also see people not spending so much on the defense like they are this year. It's just because there seems to be this massive gap between sort of the mid-tier players and the top-tier players in terms of price, that you just you're not afforded the opportunity to pick any of these guys, and so you're forced into the far better value of having like four at the back, or like I did last week, having 5 at the back, just because you get just so much more coverage around the team.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at though you had players like Jota, beginning of the season, and sporadically you've had returns from the 7.5 players, and then there was also Greenwood. Apart from that, over there hasn't been that great value in that mid-tier bracket for midfielders anyway. And because of that, we've seen teams go heavy on forwards, heavy on defenders, and then premium midfielders effectively.
Yeah, so it's sort of been a forced structure this season, hasn't it?
And it's the midfielders that actually have been the enablers in our teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, that's a wrap for this episode. So, yeah, all the best for everybody in Game Week 11. If you can, well, I should be following my own rules, I suppose. But like I said, I was trying to, beat the price rise with Ramsdale. But if you can really try and roll, if you've got 2 free transfers, roll 1 into the international break. And if you can, and it's not an essential transfer, try and keep 2 free transfers for the international break. So much goes on. We have no idea what's going to happen, when players are going to come back. We saw what happened with the Brazilian players and so on, previous international break. So yeah, just keep that at the back of your mind when doing your transfers. But yeah, all the best to everybody for Game Week 11, and then yeah, we'll catch up so soon.
Thanks so much, Clyde. We'll see you again next week.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.